a Nobody's Project production. Welcome back to Season 2. Before we get into this season's schedule, we've put together a 2-part series summarising the Project Kickoff series, which were episodes 1 through to 10 of Season 1. These episodes span across the wide range of topics and ideas that are important to understanding the baseline of knowledge we need to deliver Season 2's episodes. Today we have episodes 1 through to 5, and then next week episodes 6 through to 10. This will then lead into Season 2, which starts in late August. If you haven't listened to all of Season 1, we do encourage you to find the time to go and listen. Many of the subjects in Season 2 are built upon information from Season 1 content. And as we progress through the social project, we recommend that the previous released episodes are best listened to chronologically. So let's do a recap and then dive into the smelly, sticky mess that is Season 2 of Too Many Arseholes. Hey, let's have a bit of conversation, and not one that ends with, well, they're just a fucking arsehole. Why does the conversation always stop there? Why can't we continue the conversation to better understand why they're an arsehole? Have they always been an arsehole? Are they only an arsehole to a particular person or a certain group of people? How exactly would that conversation go? What are the right words to use, the nuances to understand, and what outcomes do we want to achieve? Rather than work with abstract ideas, can we utilize the latest neuroscience, psychology, and anthropology as a basis for this better conversation? Can we learn to better identify and understand these people around us who display pathological behaviors towards us? And can we do this all by simply having a better conversation? With having a better conversation, we can start to unmask the whys behind the, why the fuck did they do that? We can identify behaviours, decisions and situations where someone isn't playing by the trusted member of society rulebook. Wouldn't it be better to understand those pathological behaviours and these arsehole people that attempt to influence, manipulate and deceive us? And importantly, can we better promote those that do play by that trusted member of society rulebook? Culturally, we throw around phrases like psychopath and sociopath. But interestingly, whenever you do the research into these words, their actual definitions quite often differ, and these definitions are inconsistent with how we see these words used generally today in a wide range of media. When doing a simple initial online search for words that describe people who are self-centered and make unempathetic decisions a lot, the terms psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, and antisocial personality disorder were the only commonly available words we could identify. The other phrase most suitable was pathological, as in, they're a pathological liar. None of these words are suited to what we need to have this better conversation. They are more often than not the extreme end of the behaviours we are wanting to discuss. We need a simple noun to create a base level of discourse in our society around these people, because these people and their behaviours are having a negative effect on our social cohesion. They take advantage of one of our primary values, social trust. They're able to succeed in their goals because they are not distracted by considering or caring for others. So who are they? What is this now we need to start this better conversation? Something simple, something common. What can we call all these arseholes in our lives? Oh, and there it is. Arseholes. There's so many of them. There's just too many arseholes. Thanks for joining us today for Season 1, Episode 1 of Too Many Arseholes. In today's episode, we are looking at what's the underlying premise of this project? What is social trust and pathological behaviours? We are also going to identify who these arseholes are and ask the question, why are there too many? We will explore what events and cultural changes have occurred over recent history that has brought us to this social challenge, and let's together start to explore themes and lessons from our past. What can we learn from neuroscience, psychology, and anthropology to help base this better conversation in fact and peer-reviewed research? What knowledge and words have we lost from our past societies that would help us identify, understand, and manage these pathological behaviours now? And how to start having a better conversation with those you trust about these arseholes in our lives. A good place to start this project, podcast, and season 1 is by outlining the premise of this social project. And that premise is, if being a psychopath or a sociopath is a mental disorder, then is behaving like a psychopath or sociopath towards at least one person or group also a disorder? Should these pathological behaviours be called out? Should these arseholes or those affected by them be able to seek support? And in severe cases, should the person behaving pathologically be required to get treatment and or support similar to a person with a gambling addiction, an alcoholic attending an AA meeting, or at its extreme, should an arsehole, because of their actions, be referred to the criminal justice system? So who are we talking about then? Who are these arseholes? Well, we're potentially talking about any adult human being. The American Psychological Association states that about 50% of all people display some psychopathic traits. But more concerning is that 25 to 30% of people display significant psychopathic traits. These are our arseholes. They're not psychopaths. They're our abusive partners, horrible bosses, predatory priests and sports coaches, self-interested politicians, and profit-focused business leaders. Notable admissions from getting the arsehole tag are our young people. We are not talking about anyone under legal age, which, depending on your country and local jurisdiction, can be anywhere up to 21 years of age. This includes teenagers, preteens, children, and infants. In a later episode, we will be discussing the maturing process of children from birth through to legal maturity. This is mostly due to the neurological development required by children. It's a very important part of this better conversation, and we will explore different aspects of the maturing process over multiple episodes. Put simply, and quite humorously, all babies behave like psychopaths, and it's roughly the first 2 decades of each life that is the time allowed for a child to grow into a mature adult. A mature adult who is expected to live in alignment with the laws and the rules of their society. So, who are we talking about then? Well, we're talking about people of every race, every religion, any sex or gender, any political spectrum. Anyone who your society deems is a mature adult. Essentially, we're talking about people who can drink, drive, vote, get a gun license, or even take on a position of responsibility for others. That's about 97 to 99% of all adults. So, if you're an adult and you fuck someone over by exploiting their belief in social trust for your own benefit, then yes, we're going to call you an arsehole. But why do we think there's too many arseholes? Let's propose that pathological behaviours are on the increase throughout society in all areas, including homes, schools, workplaces, public spaces, media, social media, the internet, and politics. Incidents of bullying in schools and workplaces is rising rapidly. Influencers and celebrities have been outed for horrific and abusive acts. Young men especially are flooded with the male archetypes who promote pathological behaviours. Toxic masculinity is on the rise. To better understand why there's too many arseholes, we're going to ask and attempt to answer questions like, are there too many arseholes because it's a difficult conversation to have? Are there too many arseholes because words like psychopath and sociopath are confronting? And if so, are there other words we can use instead, like arseholes? Are there too many arseholes due to the media and movies portraying extreme versions of pathological behaviours? Are there too many arseholes because it's personally confronting to understand the concept of pathological behaviours and pathological associations? And is it because there are no well-known references and easily understood literature on pathological behaviours as opposed to pathological people? We will explore these questions and more throughout this social project. And so, how did we get here? Well, although there is no limit to where in the past we can look to better understand the current social challenges, Notable themes we'd like to start looking at include a general shift to individualism as opposed to community-mindedness, and social breakdown in community participation due to a number of factors. Some of these factors include social media, a recent pandemic, the busy dual-income family. We will look at the significant role parenting has in raising children into mature adults. With less families involved in religious groups, less children are taking part in any form of rites of passage through their childhood and teenage years. It has mostly fallen on schools to try and pick up this gap in childhood development. Other themes we will look at further include environmental factors, both natural and man-made, the rise of industrial, technological, and the capitalist eras, rapid growth in the corporate sector over the last century, and the financial upward mobility of people of younger age groups. Although there are many positives in these changes, we would like to explore the upward mobility of young adults, especially under the age of 35, who increasingly hold executive or directorship roles, and how these immature minds have influenced pathological behaviours in the corporate sector. And underpinning all these changes is a shift to hyper-capitalist societies, where money, capital, has become more important than humans. It will take us some time and lots of conversation to build up a body of knowledge that can allow us to start talking about solutions as a part of step 3. There just isn't one issue or one cause, and there will not be one solution. That is why having better conversations is an important place to start. But ultimately, the project is working towards a way forward to a greater humanity by reducing pathological behaviours that negatively affect our societies. Just remember that regardless of a person's character, we need to aid those with chronic pathological behaviours so they can be valued members of our society. And we also need to support those with acute pathological behaviours in recovering back to being a trusted member of society. It's imperative that we must always remember that we are all humans, and our humanity is our greatest strength. So, please, join in the conversation. When the clock struck midnight on the 1st of January 2025, the total population on Earth was around 8.09 billion people. That equates to roughly 80.9 million psychopaths that are apparently currently alive and living on Earth today. That also means that based on the data, there's about 240 to 405 million sociopaths in our planet's population today. Of the 80.9 million psychopaths, many of these people make up a large percentage of our prison population. Around 25 to 40% of our prisoners are diagnosed as psychopaths, and as many as 50% of our prisoners are identified as sociopaths. But we're not talking about these people. These people are not arseholes. They're psychopaths and sociopaths. General estimates have that around 3 to 4% of CEOs and executives are psychopaths, and a larger percentage are sociopaths. But we are not talking about these people. These people are not arseholes. They're psychopaths and sociopaths. Movies, for as long as they've been around, have portrayed people who are murderous, dangerous, manipulative, and generally great evil characters or antagonists as psychopaths. But we are not talking about these people. These people are not arseholes. In fact, they're not even psychopaths. They are more closely aligned to psychotics, sadistic psychopaths, perverted psychopaths, and other forms of mental disorders. What are the differences between psychopaths and sociopaths anyway? Do they behave differently? We'll go into this later in the episode and in the series, but for the purpose of this project and in alignment with a general consensus in the psychologist circles, both psychopaths and sociopaths present the same pathological behaviours. The main difference in these two disorders, and to put it most simply, psychopaths have inherited genes that affect how their neurons develop, how their brain matures, and how they can adapt to basic standards of living socially. It's a genetic thing. Sociopaths, on the other hand, have the capability to adapt to and live socially. However, they have either unformed parts of the brain or trauma to the brain that has impacted some specific areas in the frontal lobe. It's a neurological thing. So psychopaths have a genetic problem, and sociopaths have a neurological problem. And arseholes, well, it's probably a bit of one, maybe a bit of the other. We'll see as we get further into this project. Interestingly though, according to the American Psychological Association, about 25% to 30% of the general population displays significant pathological traits, and up to 50% of the population displays some psychopathic traits. Who are these people? What does the APA define as a significant psychopathic trait? Does the data from the APA help us define who our arseholes are? Do these numbers include sociopathic traits? Are these behaviours even the same? Shit, could any one of us potentially be an arsehole? The simple answer is yes. Kinda. Maybe? Thanks for joining us today for Season 1, Episode 2 of Too Many Arseholes. In today's episode, we are taking a good look at who these arseholes really are. After having a quick look at the statistics, the history of the terms psychopath and sociopath, and going through a behavioural checklist, we'll tackle the question, is an arsehole a person or a behaviour? What does a spectrum of pathological behaviours look like? We'll also play with some charts to help us align in how we identify who gets the arsehole tag and who doesn't. And we'll finish up with how to spot an arsehole and what psychologists recommend we do. One of the first questions we had to tackle when putting together the Too Many Arseholes social project's mission and premise was to clearly define if an arsehole was a person or a behaviour. Is it a noun, an adjective, or a verb? Obviously, we are using it as a noun in the project title, but that's mostly because it really works. There's too many people behaving like arseholes, just doesn't ring. The origin of this question came from the search to find a better word to call a person who is a quarter psychopathic or half psychopathic. So initially, it was a person, but that didn't work by the true definition, because if a person is half psychopathic, then are they also half normal? We need a better word for that as well. Then the question swung to the behaviour side, and so it feels more natural to say, bloody hell, what a psychopath. But it didn't take long to see that if the word we are looking for is to identify and or describe a half psycho person, then it really comes down to perspective. It's the perspective of the recipients, or those who are observing this pathological association, is that they are wanting to have a better conversation, and they are needing a better word than psychopath. So eventually it came down to nuance and context. An arsehole is a noun. You're an arsehole. An arsehole is also an adjective. Geez, that's arsehole behaviour. Arseholes is also a collective noun. There's an arsehole of managers over there. It can also be a verb. He's arseholing around again. It can also be an adverb. That's an arsehole move. It's quite a versatile word, just like the word fuck, which coincidentally is the word often used by the recipient when they start to realise what's going on. So is the word arsehole a person or a behaviour? It's both, depending on the perspective and context. But it also depends on the intensity and or the severity of the behaviour that crosses the line from socially trustworthy behaviour to arsehole behaviour and then to psychopathic behaviour. It's the 50 shades of grey between socially trustworthy behaviour and psychopathic behaviour that's our arsehole's playground. A common point most psychologists make when discussing psychopaths and or sociopaths' behaviour is that they confirm it's a spectrum disorder. But almost every time they are interviewed, they then go back to psychopaths and don't explain or extrapolate further on the spectrum. What does a mildly psychopathic behaviour look like? What does some significant pathological behaviour look like? How do you describe the different levels of behaviour across this pathological spectrum? To aid in our better conversation, we're going to have a crack at creating a very simple scale. Let's start with a simple 5-level scale to capture the levels of intensity of the pathological behaviours, and we'll revise it as we get further into the project. Let's start with none, to represent that there is no pathological behaviour, that association, is a socially trustworthy association. Then let's use mild to represent minor pathological behaviours, like when someone doesn't say hi or respond to a hello, a handshake, or a similar behaviour. On a side note, not responding to someone in email, text, and on the socials is a complex subject, and we will dedicate lots of better conversation to that subject, mostly because of all the nuances and context required. Back to the scale. Moderate, for want of a better word, can be our halfway point. Significant can capture the top part of the spectrum, and finally, total or completely are good words for behaviour that is completely psychopathic, or that person's a total psychopath. But being a total psychopath can be interpreted as that person is psychopathic to everyone they associate with. We're not focused on total psychopaths. We are looking again at the 50 shades of grey between a trustworthy person and a psychopath. So let's go with complete, the top end of the scale. The most common answer psychologists give when you ask what can you do when you find you're in a pathological association is that you need to walk away. You need to remove yourself from the situation as carefully as possible. You cannot reason with them, and their words cannot be trusted. That sounds good in principle, but it's not applicable across a lot of situations. The best advice we have heard suggested is a slight extension of this response, and that is simply don't try engaging with them on their behaviour, and don't upset them until you are fully across the situation and you have plans to move on. People generally don't like having something taken away from them. And for arseholes, it's doubly so when someone they have been treating pathologically, for whatever personal benefit, is wanting to get out. How that looks will depend on the context and the nuance of the given situation. As a social project, we are not in solution mode yet. But ultimately, in most situations, the association will need to be broken before any remedy could be possible. It's a deficiency in their neurology. The hardware is not there to run the software. They can't behave in this higher socially minded way. What we can do is, if possible, have a better conversation with the recipient, or at least bring a group of people who care for the recipient into this better conversation. We can't stress the importance of getting across all the complexities in a given situation, but for now, better conversations are an obvious way forward. So please, join in the conversation. Imagine it's a few years into the future and we've finally mastered artificial general intelligence, AGI. This amazing breakthrough is possible because we include a piece of technology that conducts checks on whether the inputs and outputs are trustworthy, considerate, and humane within the complex neural network. This recursive check ensures each element of the inputted and encoded information is validated against its sources. It also checks that the outputted and decoded information, actions, or decisions are considerate of all humans and the environments those actions and decisions affect. This became a trusted AGI and was widely used and loved. However, as the AGI progressed over the years, the hardware, the servers, and the data centers that were required to make the AGI provide trusted information and rational responses to its logic and reasoning outputs needed constant upgrading and maintenance. The key component of the AGI, the part that made it trustworthy, this recursive check on the inputs and the outputs, well, the check on the information, the bit that made sure the AGI's actions and decisions were trustworthy, it only worked properly on the old servers. Because the AGI was self-monitoring its systems, it failed to notice these recursive checks were failing more and more over time. And this was because the hardware required to run these checks was failing to run the checks. And so the trustworthy AGI slowly and unnoticeably degraded whilst it continued to serve the general population. Over time, people started to get a funny feeling about some of the AGI outputs, but they trusted that the AGI was monitoring itself correctly, that the system reports were accurate, and the actions and decisions, let's call them the AGI behaviours, were slowly becoming less and less considerate of the effects its outputs had on humans and the environment. After further hardware, server and data center upgrades, that icky feeling, that slight frustration about the AGI had grown, but no one had any idea what was wrong. They had no idea as to why they had this growing mistrust in something that had been so trustworthy for so long. They didn't even have the words to discuss what was wrong. They just had an icky feeling that was slowly becoming a frustration. If the hardware is starting to fail to run the software that checks the hardware, how do we pick this up? Over the last century, we have seen enormous changes in science, technology, and industry. It has changed how we live, what we eat and drink, the air we breathe, and how and when we sleep, just to name a few important parts of our daily life. How the fuck did we get here? Well, if we no longer have the hardware, or if our collective hardware is damaged, how are we expected to notice the software is failing too? Are we all sleepwalking into another social pandemic? Well, wake up and let's have a better conversation. Thanks for joining us today for Season 1, Episode 3 of Too Many Arseholes. In today's episode, we are taking a brief look at the human civilization journey, how we created societies and the genetic and social evolutions behind this. We also look at the social leadership experiments and how nations rose and fell. And finally, we ask a few questions regarding what has happened to us since the advent of the industrial, capitalist, and technological eras. To fully appreciate the societal achievements humans have made, let's go all the way back to the evolution of tribal living and the earliest emergence of Homo sapiens and other hominids around 300,000 BCE. Over the next 100,000 years or so, a lot of the most basic genetic evolutions and new neural structures formed that facilitated community living. Brains had started to reach Homo sapien size, and the human form started representing our current size and shape. From around 200,000 BCE to roughly 15,000 BCE, humans conquered continental living by expanding across the earth through migrating tribes, changes to environments, and improved technologies for environmental adaptation. The expanding and evolving societies gradually turned to more efficient forms of living that included the development of agriculture and animal domestication around 10,000 years ago. This marked a significant shift, leading to settled communities and the rise of complex societies. From very roughly around 10,000 BCE, complex societies saw innovative societal hierarchies and religious ideologies bring people together. Larger and larger groupings of people formed into distinct races, and they eventually unified in ways including kingdoms, city-states, and empires. At around 5000 BCE onwards, agriculture, continental trade, and labour specialisation created more efficient societies with the production of surplus food leading to population growth. This in turn also brought developments in cultural specialities like formal religions, broader art forms, systems of government, law and order. As each civilization expanded and retracted across the globe from 5000 BCE through to the 1400s CE, our societies saw a convergence of religious doctrines with the rise of monotheism, ever-expanding trade networks, as well as formalised currencies, which ultimately led to global networks, economic links, and trade. From the 1400s CE, humans started expanding across oceans to join continents through slavery, colonies, and then empires. Land trade routes were replaced with ocean trade routes, and the world map no longer had parts that had written, "Here be dragons," to mean, we have absolutely no idea what's here. Communities and families were still some of the primary social units. The printing press was not far away, and for social evolution, printed information ignited major changes in Europe and redefined religion, trade, currency, knowledge, and power. With ever-increasing empires and the supporting private commercial interests pushing them along, we saw colonies turn into nations. The Europeans' influence was reaching its zenith, and humans continued to adapt, thrive, war, and trade globally. By the 1700s CE, we started seeing geopolitics formalise its borders as we fell flat-faced into the industrial era. The somewhat traditional rural or urban lifestyles of mostly local food and products was about to be ripped apart. Our cities industrialised, our work styles changed, and so did our environments. Mass population kicked up a serious notch in all developed areas globally. One social structure that can be used as a good marker for our social evolution, and that also ebbed and flowed throughout history, was slavery. It took time for the Industrial Revolution to reposition how the business of slavery was conducted, but ultimately, humanity evolved out of their othering and enslaving practices. In the mid-1900s, slavery was all but abolished globally. Medical innovation throughout the 1700s through to present have created greater health equality and longevity, with science stepping in to pick up where local remedies fell short. Improvements in how women and babies survive childbirth greatly pushed the life expectancy up. Science was also starting to understand more how our bodies and brains were being affected by the increase in pollution and changes to our diets. With the invention of the telegram in the 1850s, we took another step in our social journey towards globalisation with the ability to connect across the oceans. We moved from the horse as our primary mode of transport to the train and the automobile. Our ability to pollute the planet and ourselves went up another notch. We finally entered the 20th century with many aspirations. Electricity was spreading and we were becoming more and more independent with newer and newer gadgets. Flight was not far away, and metaphorically, the human species was about to take off. With the turn of the century in 1900, you would be forgiven for thinking the industrious countries of the world were starting to get a good glimpse into the future. Books were being written about going to the moon. Telegrams were being sent across the planet. Trade was strong, and cultures were expanding. The world was shifting into the final stages of globalization without a plan. World War I shocked the world. The momentum of military technology ran headlong into old military practices with disastrous effect, and at that stage we hadn't even really started using flight as a means of warfare. For those that fought and survived, the war changed them more than they realised. Although unknown at the time, the new military bombardment techniques left many men with massive head injuries, along with all the other traumas perpetrated in war. The internal combustion engine became our primary form of power for transport, haulage, and ocean transport, and with it came the tetralethal lead poisoning. One of those men with World War I head injuries started World War II. This then took a massive chunk out of Europe, Eastern Europe, North Africa, Asia, and Southeast Asia. It divided nations, cleared out financial power centres, and humanity, for the first time, had to figure out how to live in a world with the nuclear bomb. World War II didn't bring peace and global unity. Instead, it fractured the global society into East and West, and our thirst for war continued. Post-World War II saw another increase in independent living through technology, and the central religious family unit started to shift away from a religion and more to capitalism and consumerism. The post-World War II era also saw humanity question if we were alone and can we create our own intelligence. Capitalism shifted into top gear from the 70s onwards, with social institutions including utilities, medical, communication, news, and others being pulled from the government's periphery to the corporate world, and with it, the corporate way of working. And we all started to consume lots of things. The more we consumed, the more we wanted. The cost of living increased so much so that having one parent at home to raise children became harder and harder to afford. Religion in the family unit further lost ground in this world of hyper-consumerism as we pushed further into the 21st century. We are now sitting on the shoulders of 4 generations that have endured world wars, lead poisoning, the fracturing of social norms, inundation of information, advertising and greed, and the breakdown of institutions. We have abolished slavery and worked hard to remove segregation and racism. We can now socialise online with anyone, anytime, while our epidemic of loneliness grows and grows. Was the 20th century an explosion of hope for the future, or a century of social traumas, social change, and social division? And that brings us to the 21st century, the The internet, smartphones, and social media have hit us all like a ton of bricks. Online communities, Facebook groups, Discord, and Snapchat have replaced parks, backyards, the creek, and the mall for our children and teenagers. Community participation and volunteering has seen a significant drop in numbers. The cost of living, housing affordability, medical access, and political turmoil has shaken the foundations of our social structures, and AI has emerged as a potential force that will shake up our labour, our jobs, and how we interact with the world going forward. Or will it? Since AI came online over 3 years ago, those that futurise about its impact have been able to sell its potential. Businesses and governments have dived headfirst into the shallow waters of swapping labour for AI solutions. The current US stock exchange lists the 5 biggest players in the AI gold rush in the top 6, with NVIDIA, the computer chip manufacturer, holding up the entire American economy along with them at the top. But are the current large language models the solution businesses and governments are expecting? It's quite a feat to replicate the human brain to the point of replacing it as your primary workforce. It will ultimately, as always, come down to humanity. The ability to trust each other so that we can work with each other and accomplish amazing things is the 101 of civilization. Regarding AI, it will also be our ability to trust it with tasks we would trust humans to do. Early adopters of AI assistance, AI creativity, and AI automation are pushing its capabilities, but AI is struggling with logic, reasoning, and other simple tasks that humans do daily. How can we adopt a new intelligence if we can't trust it? How can we build AI to be trustworthy if we don't understand how we ourselves are trustworthy humans? If we don't have a good grasp on how we function as individuals in a society and how our neurons support these capabilities, then how can we expect to design new forms of intelligence that need to resemble us and that can function within our societies? If we no longer hold the values of trust, reliability, and social consideration out front, how will our societies survive when we are interacting less, living more isolated lives, and the feeling of human togetherness is replaced with forever scrolls, likes, shares, and clicks? And all this is brought to you by AI that has no social conscience, no human reference, and no transparent system of social trust with which it engages with the societies that it is replacing. It's a two-edged sword. We accomplish these amazing technological feats, but by doing this, we create new technologies that are pulling us apart. We need a better conversation to identify and understand this existential challenge. With the geopolitical clashes that are inevitable as our populations grow, with the threats of climate change putting more and more pressure on our ways of life, humans are going to need each other to survive, adapt, and thrive again. It's humanity that will get us through this. We need to talk about it. We need to understand how our current social issues are not destined. We potentially have had the last of a poisoned generation with brain injury after effects from 2 world wars, deciding on how we would embrace this new digital technology over the last 4 decades. This hyper-capitalist, war-hungry, consume at all cost, move fast, break things, disruptive digital era has one thing in common, and that it is very inhumane and very anti-society. That's worth having a better conversation about, so please, join in the conversation. Let's go back to 1985. If you weren't alive then, bring a parent or an older relative or friend with you on this little journey. Take yourself back to 1985 and take in the social scenery, the lifestyle, and importantly, how you associated with those closest to you, those you listened to, those you watched, or those you read. Make a cross-section, a snapshot of your social circle and the society around you back then. Include the media, politicians, community groups, and prominent local community members and leaders that influenced you. Ponder how you and those closest to you felt about these people you associated with, either directly as in your community and broader family groups, or indirectly like media personalities, journalists, politicians, and celebrities. Now, let's go back to the future. How do you feel about a similar cross-section of today's society? Do you trust them? Can you read or watch the news without checking the sources to see how inaccurate or biased it may be? Do you trust your politicians? Can you trust your teachers, your priests, or sports coaches? Look at the stats. It's safer now than in most times throughout history. Back in 1985, did we trust our society more then than we should have? Do we trust people in our society now less than we should? That would make for a better conversation. With the introduction over the last few decades of the internet, social media, and more recently AI platforms, the lack of accountability people now have has enormously impacted on how we behave compared to how we would have behaved socially back in 1985, with almost no ability at all to be anonymous. Has our accountability and responsibility been eroded with these new technologies? How can this not affect us all socially? With many areas of the internet, we can share our darker side and express our pathological instincts anonymously, and in many cases without any fear of recourse, and we can now do this globally. We have seen a rise in antisocial groups and activity that the anonymous internet has facilitated since the 90s. But more importantly for this project, people have less and less need to mature and become responsible adults. They can make a career on the internet without needing to be considerate of others and accountable for their actions. The algorithms support these voices as they push the user to click more, follow the outrage, stay consumed so we can show you more ads and make more money. Going back to 1985 once more, our access to global news was limited to a page or two deep inside the newspaper or later in the news hour. We could count our news sources on one hand. We trusted them and they were loyal to the trust we had in them. News and reporting standards these days have been given the runaround. We now have more access to information without guidelines, standards, or natural restrictions. We create information silos where we lose a healthy cross-section of news that was available to us on the radio, television, or newspaper back in the pre-internet era. How can our society and those within it not be affected by 40 years of enormous change? So to answer Marty McFly's question at the end of Back to the Future...
Wait a minute, Doc, what are you talking about? What happens to us in the future? What, do we become assholes or something?
Yes, Marty. Quite possibly. Yes, we do. Thanks for joining us today for Season 1, Episode 4 of Too Many Arseholes. In today's episode, we attempt to make the assertion, why are there too many arseholes? We look a bit closer at social trust and the complications that arise from how you prioritise different levels of trust. We then take a long walk through modern day's trust associations from personal through to global, highlighting why, in today's world, we are submitting to you that there are just too many arseholes making too many decisions that are serving their hyper-capitalist agendas with drastic effects on humanity. In 2020, COVID raced across the planet, putting many nations into forced lockdown and other virus-spreading mitigating strategies. Using the analogy that someone is at their best when given a real challenge, our nations were challenged and failed, and their responses didn't unite us, they divided us. The global disruption that is social media continues to impact nations and polarise politics. It has brought distrust to our institutions and national services and divided our communities. Elections aren't community-building exercises anymore. They are touted as a fight to the death. The hyper-capitalist food industry crammed inflation, shrinkflation, skimpflation, and excuselation all together. In our thirst for new things, the food industry drags us further away from the food we need to eat to have healthy brains. And our ability to produce food has been taken from the small to medium farm to the large-scale global food conglomerates, gutting our local communities, putting more stress on supply lines, and changing the actual food we eat through chemical additives and treatments designed to make the food last longer. Not better, last longer. It's all about making profits at the cost of our health. Does that sound familiar? Farming and food production have a lot to answer for, and we are not talking about the local farmers. It is the large organisations. It is the squeeze on margins, the pollution, the destruction of natural land, the fertilisers, pesticides and chemicals that we now use to ensure greater yields. Our food networks are now beyond national links, and any global incident can put an entire product line off the supermarket shelves overnight. This has all greatly impacted our environment, our global home. Our attempt at tackling climate change nationally with the commitments made at the Paris Agreement in 2015 have not been met. we are seeing nations drop their agreements more and more due to economic pressure. Hypercapitalism strikes again. If we are going to be truly united as a planet, then it's our environment that will bring us together. You can't wreck one part of the planet without it affecting other parts. It's all we've got as a species. But the challenge is that nations own the environmental problem at the moment. It will only get worse unless we succeed in global initiatives. The illusion of coming out of World War II into a new global community has backflipped. Geopolitical tension is still one of humanity's greatest challenges, and as we continue to grow our populations, the tensions can only increase. Continued growth cannot be sustained. Capitalism only works in a world of infinite resources. Our resources are not infinite. We are the only living thing that creates waste that cannot be recycled or reused, and this is having an enormous impact on our planet and our environment. We have caused the sixth mass extinction, the Holocene extinction. Many of our beloved air, land and sea creatures are gone or going soon. They won't come back. We are shrinking our planet's lungs, the rainforests, for more unsustainable farming, kicking the rainforest inhabitants out of their home and onto the proverbial streets. They do not survive. This hyper-capitalist vision has driven the tech world to feed our worst habits for their greatest profits. There's not a lot of love, consideration or support driving the algorithms. And we could keep going on and on about the instability of international trading networks and supply lines, precariousness of the profit-hungry global interlinked financial and insurance businesses, displaced people from tyrannical regimes that are driving mass migration, the industrial war machine that's pushing for somewhere, anywhere to make war, and of course we haven't really dug into the impacts of COVID just yet. Don't worry, we will. As a species, we have the ability to solve for all of these problems. We really do. But it won't make anyone big bucks. The resolution for the centuries of mass pollution, mass culling, mass extinction, and mass deforestation will come at a price one way or the other. We can do it now, or force our kids to have to pay the piper at some stage in the future. And so we finally get back around to the central topic at hand. Why do we think that there are too many arseholes as opposed to there being a few more arseholes than we would like, or not being too many arseholes that our society can't handle? This is not an argument that can be purely based on stats and data. We know that the types of crime and the rates of crime have steadily fallen across most Western countries since the 60s and 70s. We also know that divorce rates have stabilised since the 90s. So how do we put forward then that there are too many arseholes? Well, buckle in for this one. Often we have put forward that it always comes down to humanity, and it still does. The Oxford English Dictionary definitively states that humanity is the state or quality of being human. In most ethical traditions, membership of the human species is seen as conferring a unique moral status, so that human life is considered inherently and particularly valuable and worthy of protection. Humanity may be defined in terms of a unique capability to feel, reason, evoke emotional responses or form relationships, and it is displayed through compassion and/or benevolence. Let's say that again. Human life is inherently and particularly valuable and worthy of protection. Humanity. That's us. To not hold humanity at the center of all behaviours is like a cell in your body deciding not to form and not behave exactly the way it evolved to be. Unless it's of civil or social importance, to behave pathologically, even just a little bit, is not being aligned to this 300,000-year organism that has expanded across the planet and put itself on the edge of becoming a spacefaring species. When a cell behaves out of alignment with the body, it is identified by the immune system as a cancerous cell and destroyed. And it's when the cancer has bypassed the immune system or the immune system has started to fail that cancer spreads. Our inbuilt social trust, our laws, rules, policies, etiquette, manners, and behavioural expectations are our social standards and detection mechanisms against these cancerous pathological behaviours. Our penal system, fines and other civil restrictions are our social autoimmune systems at work. But areas like corporate, social media and AI are always ahead of our justice system and our regulations. This cancerous behaviour is outpacing our social defences. The human species has always had challenges with pathological people and pathological behaviours. It's not new. All cultures have their stories of when life was good and stable and when societies faltered. When humans cause these impacts, societal cohesion is being pulled apart and priorities are changed from the core things that make humans what they are, the humanity. But first at home, we try our best to raise healthy, community-minded young adults. Then our community embraces and promotes those that are best placed to take on key societal roles we have. Our societies are the macro versions of our communities. Our nations and the world are all layers of these aligned behaviours, trusted norms, and implicit accepted standards of being part of humanity. And none of this is embodied by hyper-capitalism. None of this is primary to consumerism. None of this is evident in politics, the media, and social media. Those that have contributed to our current societies have not moderated the digital disruption of the last 50 years. They have not limited the expansion of gross wealth and the ensuring commodification of humans. They have not provided clean, healthy living. The cycle of sickness is now also a privatised profit arm. Why on earth is money driving healthcare systems? How did that happen? Our elderly are not humans anymore. If a human isn't an asset, it's a liability apparently. How inhumane is that reflection of our current societies? We scrape and pillage our resources and planet. David Attenborough, David Suzuki and others have dedicated their entire life's work to communicating this message, and yet the message doesn't get through. Why? Well, that's because we have too many arseholes in charge. There are too many arseholes making hyper-capitalist decisions on what we eat, how we pollute our environment, how we should get healthcare, how our elderly are treated, and how our children are educated. And we promote all this with resilient hyper-capitalist fervour. There are too many arseholes displaying pathological behaviours that are getting promoted in this hyper-capitalist world into decision-making positions. Money and lobbying in politics has distorted who we put in charge. Those in charge are not dedicating their time to leading us. They're spending their time chasing donations for their next election. There's no structure left to allow humane people, those our society designed best, to be the leaders of our future. Late-stage hyper-capitalists are grabbing all they can before it collapses. They are grabbing everything they can in front of our eyes, and all us humans stand here with no capability to call foul, no capability to identify and act on these inhumane decisions, nor to divert from this path towards potential disruption or collapse. We feel rudderless. Sane and humane people are not at the helm. But we will get through this. We will survive. We will adapt. And we will thrive again. But it robs us of our most important resource, our time. It will come at a huge cost, and more importantly, it will impact on our children. The generational trauma cycle will kick over once again if we don't confront these challenges now. And that's affecting humanity's future. It's worth talking about, so please, join in the conversation. Our past is full of amazing lives lived, brilliant and intelligent individuals who break through artistic, scientific, military and economical barriers to forge our civilization forward. We know of the greatest personalities through our history classes, our books and podcasts, but there are countless others who work diligently who don't make the shortest of the short list of historical geniuses. There are numerous individuals who hold up platforms on which our historical favourites stand upon. One of these favourites is Sir Isaac Newton, who once said humbly, "If I've been able to see further, it's only because I stood on the shoulders of giants." And so look further and further we have as a civilization. If we go back only 140 years to around the time Back to the Future 3 was set, there have been incredible advancements in science, medicine, technology, flight, space, internet, and all the rest. So let's look at the life of someone who was born back in 1892 and lived all the way through to actually be able to see Back to the Future when it got released in 1985. and that is Princess Caroline of Schönberg-Hartenstein. Princess Caroline was born in the now named Czech Republic. She lived through the turn of the century in her childhood, the First Flight and World War I in her 20s. Princess Caroline saw the rise of the Nazis in her 40s, then World War II, nuclear weapons, the Cold War, and the space race in her 70s. And, most likely to her disgust, the early days of Europop and electro music in her 80s and 90s. Princess Caroline bore witness to an amazing period of global change, scientific and technological advancement, and she had an incredible front row seat. Princess Caroline's first husband, Constantine, was one of these lesser-known genius go-getters of the late 19th and early 20th century. He was born in Austria to Greek immigrants and succeeded in his studies from a young age. Constantine was the first Austrian to gain an international pilot certificate in 1912. His studies and career, however, was in psychiatry and neurology. He is credited with identifying and describing the disease encephalitis in 1917, and he also went on to publish one of the first cytoarchitectural studies, which is the mapping of the human brain's neural structures and cortices. Constantine's family had been granted a baronship, and their family name had been changed from the Greek economo to von Economo. And it is this name that he gave to a very specific new neuron structure he also identified and described in his monumental work, The Cytoarchitectronics of the Cerebral Cortex of Adult Man, published in 1925. We will spend some time looking at these neurons and the frontal cortex as part of this project. This is because the latest fMRI technology and recent studies have started to clarify what these special neurons do. It appears they facilitate how we behave socially. More importantly, it's these neurons that are missing in psychopaths and damaged in sociopaths. So thanks, Princess Caroline, for being a wonderful support to Constantine. And Constantine, please stand still so we can stand on your shoulders for a while as we attempt to look even further into the human brain to hopefully find out what it means to be a human being. Thanks for joining today for Season 1, Episode 5. In today's episode, we start to build an understanding of what is the science behind all this. We have a quick look at the history and the early interpretations of what our brains do. We get a better understanding of mirror and von Economo neurons, how technology has aided in scanning the brain and identifying pathological patterns. We also look at the various ways our brains can be impacted through accidents, abuse, and poor choices. And finally, what current options we have to recover through therapy. We also want to apologise in advance for mispronounced words and names. This is a science and scientists-focused episode, so we are trying our best. Our own human brain has been an unmapped territory, a misunderstood organ, a puzzle that many humans have sought prestige from by pretending they've solved its inner workings. It's probably one of the hardest things to do, that is, to think about and understand the thing that we think with. Our study of the human brain is a great example of the phrase, science is not about getting things right, it's about getting things less wrong. And we have been slowly getting things less wrong for a few millennia. Fucking Aristotle once proposed that the heart was the centre of human consciousness and that the brain was nothing more than a cooling system for the blood. Well, haven't we come a long way from there? The Egyptians were also very interested in the brain, and there is evidence of cranial holes drilled into living humans to help with relieving pressure or assisting with mental disorders. But we don't really know for sure. The brain has been an enigma for humankind ever since, well, forever. Our philosophers, psychologists, and anthropologists have all contributed to better understanding us and our brains. Scattered through history are attempts to learn and understand this most complex of biologies. The medieval Muslim world wrote quite extensively on medical problems with the brain, and there are smatterings of efforts all the way through to the 1700s, which is where we start to really get some traction of what exactly is all this grey matter between our ears. And that is mostly because we hadn't understood electricity and the nervous system for starters. Luigi Galvani's pioneering work in the late 1700s started a journey with studies in the electrical excitability in muscles and nerves. Emile du Bois-Reymond and Hermann van Helmholtz continued pushing the research into the electrical nature of nerve signals through into the 1800s. We also had greatly improved our microscope technologies, which opened the door to exploring some of the body's smallest structures, nerves and neurons. It wasn't until near the end of the 1800s that researchers were starting to identify how different parts of the brain affected how we functioned, thought, and sensed the world around us. And this was with thanks to what happened to people like Phineas Gage, but we'll talk about him another day. Along with many other schools and luminaries around the world, Konstantin von Economo was an unassuming, one of many, dedicated intellect on the subject of the brain, and his detailed work in creating the psychoarchitectronics of the cerebral cortex of man set up many researchers for the future of exploring and understanding the mysteries of the brain. We'll quote the opening of an article from The New Scientist. Are these the brain cells that give us consciousness? July 2012, as they tell this part of the story really well. Quote, "The origin of consciousness has been one of the biggest mysteries of all time, occupying philosophers and scientists for generations. So it's strange to think that a little-known neuroscientist called Konstantin von Economo may have unearthed an important clue nearly 90 years ago. When he peered down the lens of his microscope in 1926, von Economo saw a handful of brain cells that were long, spindly, and much larger than those around them. In fact, they looked so out of place that at first he thought they were a sign of some kind of disease. But the more brains he looked at, the more these particular cells he found, and always in the same two small areas that evolved to process smell and flavours. Von Economo briefly pondered what these rod and corkscrew cells, as he called them, might be doing, but without the technology to delve much deeper, he soon moved on to more promising lines of inquiry. Little more was said about these neurons until nearly 80 years later, when Esther Niemczynski and Patrick Hoff from Mount Sinai University in New York also stumbled across clusters of these strange-looking neurons. Now, after more than a decade of functional imaging and post-mortem studies, we are beginning to piece together their story. Certain lines of evidence hint that they may help build rich inner lives we call consciousness, including emotions, our sense of self, empathy, and our ability to navigate social relationships." End quote. Now that's a big claim to make, especially when we still struggle to identify and describe consciousness today. But go and read the article by Caroline Williams and come to your own conclusions. What we have seen in repeated studies across the neuroscience community is the linkage between von Economo neurons, VENs, in the prefrontal cortices and socio-emotional behaviours in adult humans. It's a lot more complicated than we alluded to in the opening episode. Yes, less than 20% of VENs in a brain is linked to psychopathic behaviour. But our brains are not that simple, and diving into the biological psychopathology won't yield a clear set of results. If a scan shows A, then we can't come to conclusion B without understanding the whole person. But as we'll see later in this episode, PET and fMRI scans have been extensively used by neuroscientists to assist psychologists to find links between the brain structure and how we think and function as a human. Continuous advancement in the different brain scanning technologies have opened up the ability now for medical teams to see and diagnose brain disorders and diseases. It was only up until around a decade ago that neurons and the smallest of brain structures were only able to be studied in post-mortem, which creates a few problems if we're wanting to study and diagnose someone who is still alive. It's still very early days for any well-known and recognised therapy options for a person identified with psychopathy or sociopathy. Up until quite recently, the common response was that they can't be rehabilitated. Just ask James Grigson, Dr. Death from Texas. But we're not here to accept that view. It is too inhumane a thought to give up on any person, especially with a mental disorder. Throughout most of the 20th century, people suffered antisocial behavioural disorders were potentially subjected to all kinds of treatment, from restraints and isolation to electrotherapy. Up until recently, talk therapy through psychologists and counsellors was the main publicly available option for therapy. But talk therapy relies on the patient being honest and open with the therapist. That's not something pathological people can do. They are happy talking, but they aren't going to be honest about themselves, and a therapist should not trust anything they say. We are starting to see better results in the psychedelic therapy trials. People suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, are getting great results from MDMA, also known as ecstasy sessions, with trained and licensed therapists. There are strong cases being made for MDMA and other traditional recreational drugs like psilocybin and LSD being thoroughly trialled to better support society with options to help rehabilitate a person who has suffered abuse of all kinds, the impacts of crime, veterans and participants in war, and other traumatic experiences. It's the not giving up on anyone regardless of their mental condition that we want to bring back to the conversation. Yes, there are some pretty messed up people out there doing some pretty messed up stuff. We have the law and legal systems to help manage that. But could we open new doors through better conversations where the combined social discourse better identifies emerging behaviours in growing teenagers and adults? To start this better conversation shouldn't be a taboo, nor should it be uncomfortable. It comes from a place of love and concern. It also doesn't finish with a shoulder shrug because there are no reputable therapies or pathways a person could take to get help or support. Can these conversations be brought into the mainstream of society's discourse? And can we start to proactively get a grip on what causes pathological behaviours and how we can meet these challenges head on? Sorry, another bad pun. But puns aside, to get to this better place, we need to start having a better social discourse. So please, join in the conversation. Thanks again for taking the time to join in. In today's science and history lesson, we intended to give you a brain dump, sorry for the puns, on where the science is currently at. There is still a lot to learn, and we hope further research will aid this better conversation. Also, please note we're about halfway through our opening series of monologues to give the podcast, project, and conversation some momentum. This is intentional as we lay the foundations for this social project's themes. Until we catch up again, give a shit about our planet, and just please, don't be an arsehole.